Hello and welcome back. Today is Sunday, January 12th, 2025, and we are reading chapter 11 of Abhorsen by Garth Nix today. And I am so tired. I had a fabulous evening last night. Some of my dear friends hosted a moon circle for the first full moon of 2025, even though it's tomorrow. It's easier to get everybody together on a Saturday night than a Monday night. But I didn't realize just how badly my whole soul was just yearning to be around a group of women. And even though I have always had the love and friendship of my husband, it's just not the same as being around a bunch of girls. So I'm so grateful that I got to be a part of that last night. And I know things like that will always be few and far between in my life, but as a person who isolated for a long time and, like I said, just had my husband as my best friend, you forget what it's like to be around conscious women who are going through what you're going through and have valuable wisdom and knowledge of, different things for different people. You never know what other people know and what you can learn from strangers sometimes. So I'm so thankful for that. But anyways, I'm gonna get to reading. Okay. I feel like I was whispering during that whole monologue, so I'll try to speak up now. Chapter 11, Hidden in the Reeds. Lirael more than half expected to find a boat made of woven reeds, since the Clare had seen her and Nicholas in it on the Red Lake. Even so, she was very much relieved when she did stumble across the strange craft, because the water was now well above her thighs. If it had gotten any deeper, she would have had to turn back or risk Nick's drowning, since she couldn't carry him any other way than the fireman's lift, which put his head about 2 feet lower than hers. Carefully, she unloaded him into the center of the canoe-like boat, quickly grabbing the sides as it tipped. The boat was about twice as long as she was tall, but very narrow apart from its midsection, so there would be only just enough room for both of them. Nick was semi-conscious, but he rallied as they sat quietly in the boat, and Lirael considered her options. The reeds leaned over them, creating a secret bower, and small water birds called plaintively nearby, with the occasional splash as one dived after some fishy treat. Lirael sat with her sword across her lap and a hand on the bell bandolier, listening. The marsh birds would be happily piping and fishing, then they would suddenly go silent and hide deeper in the reeds. Lirael knew it was because gore crows were flying low overhead. She could feel the cold spirit that inhabited them, single-mindedly following the orders of its necromancer master, searching for her. The boat was exactly as the Clare had said it would be, but Lirael felt a strange new fear as she sat rocking in it. This was the limit of the Clare's vision. They had seen her here with Nicholas, but no further, and they had not seen what Nicholas was. Was their sight limited because this was the end? Was Hedge about to appear through the reeds? Or would the destroyer emerge from within the slight young man opposite her? "What are you waiting for?" Nick asked suddenly, showing himself to be more recovered than she'd thought. Lirael jumped as he spoke, setting the boat rocking more violently. Nick's voice was loud, strange in the quiet world of the reeds. "Silence!" ordered Lirael in a stern whisper. "Or what?" asked Nick with some bravado. But he spoke more softly, and his eyes were on her sword. A few seconds passed, then Lirael said, "We're waiting for noon, when the sun is brightest and the dead are weak. Then we'll head along the lake shore and, hopefully, make it to a meeting place where your friend Samuel will be." "The dead," said Nick with a superior smile. "Some local spirits to appease, I take it? And you mentioned Sam before. What's he got to do with this? Did you kidnap him too?" "The dead are the dead," replied Lirael, frowning. Sam had mentioned that Nick didn't understand, or even try to comprehend the Old Kingdom. But this blindness to reality couldn't be natural. "You have them working in your pit, Hedge's dead hands. And no, Sam is working with me to rescue you. You obviously don't understand the danger." "Don't tell me Sam has fallen back into all this superstition," said Nick. "The dead, as you call them, are simply poor unfortunates who suffer from something like leprosy. And far from rescuing me, you've taken me away from an important scientific experiment. You saw me as an owl, said Lirael, curious to find exactly how blinkered he was. With a winged dog. Hypnosis, or hallucinations, replied Nick. As you can see, I'm not well, which is another reason I shouldn't be in this compost heap of a craft. Curious, said Lirael thoughtfully. It must be the thing inside you that has closed your mind. I wonder what purpose that serves. Nick didn't reply, but he rolled his eyes eloquently enough, obviously dismissing whatever Lirael had to say. Hedge will rescue me, you know, he said. He's a very resourceful chap, and he's just as keen to stay on schedule as I am. So whatever mad belief has seized you, you should give it up and go home. In fact, I'm sure there will be some sort of reward if you returned me. A reward? Lirael laughed, but with bitterness. A horrible death? An eternal servitude? That's the reward for anyone living who goes near Hedge. But tell me, what is your experiment all about? Will you let me go if I tell you? Asked Nick. Not that it's terribly secret. After all, you won't be publishing in Ancestor and scientific journals, will you? Lirael didn't answer either question. She just looked at him, waiting for him to talk. He met her gaze at first, then faltered and looked away. There was something unnerving about her eyes, a toughness he had never seen in the young women he knew from the debutante parties in Corvier. It was partly this that made him talk, and partly a desire to impress her with his knowledge and intelligence. The hemispheres are a previously unknown metal that I postulate has almost infinite capacity to absorb electrical energy for later discharge, he said, arching his fingers together. They also create some sort of ionized field that attracts the thunderstorms, which in turn create lightning that is drawn down by the metal. Unfortunately, that ionized field also prevents working of the metal, as steel and iron tools cannot be brought close. It is my intention to connect the hemispheres to a lightning farm, which a trusted associate of mine is building in Ancestor, even as we speak. The lightning farm will be composed of 1,000 connected lightning rods that will draw down the full electrical force of an entire storm, rather than just a number of strikes, and feed it into the hemispheres. This power will, repolarize or demagnetize the two hemispheres so they can be brought together as one. This is my ultimate goal. They must be brought together, you see. It is absolutely essential. He collapsed back with the last word, his breath coming in ragged gasps. How do you know? Asked Lirael. To her it sounded like the sort of waffle used by false seers and charlatan mages, as much to convince themselves as anything. I just know, whispered Nick. I'm a scientist. When the hemispheres are in Ancestor, I will be able to prove my theories with proper instruments and proper help. Why do the hemispheres have to be brought together? Asked Lirael. That seemed to be the weakest point of his belief, and the most dangerous, for bringing the hemispheres together would make whatever was trapped inside them whole. It was only as she asked it that she realized there was a more important question. They have to be, replied Nick, puzzlement showing clearly on his face. Obviously, he couldn't think clearly about it at all. That should be obvious. Yes, of course, said Lirael soothingly. But I'm curious about how you will get the hemispheres to Ancestor. And where exactly is your lightning farm? It must be hard to set something like that up. I mean, it would take an awful lot of space. Oh, it's not as difficult as you might think, said Nick. He seemed relieved to be moving away from the subject of bringing the hemispheres together. We'll take the metal down to the sea in barges, and then follow the coast south. Apparently the waters are too disturbed, and the weather too foggy, as a rule, to go all the way by sea. We'll take them ashore just north of the wall, drag them over that, and then it's only a matter of 10 or 12 miles to Forward Mill, where my lightning farm is being built. It should be just about completed by the time we arrive, all being well. But, Lirael said, how will you get them over the wall? It's a barrier to the dead and all such things. You won't be able to get the hemispheres across the wall. Rubbish! Exclaimed Nick. You're as bad as Hedge, except that he at least is prepared to try, provided I let him do some mumbo-jumbo first. Oh, said Lirael. Obviously Hedge, or more likely his ultimate master, had found a way to get the hemispheres across the wall. It had been a vain hope anyway, because Lirael knew Hedge had crossed more than once, and Caragor and his army had crossed years ago. She'd just hoped the hemispheres would be prevented. Won't you have difficulties with the authorities in Ancelstier? Lirael asked hopefully. Sam had told her about the perimeter the Ancelstierans had built to stop anything from entering their country from the north. She had no idea what she could do if the hemispheres were taken out of the Old Kingdom. No, said Nick. Hedge says there won't be any trouble he can't handle, but I think he was a bit of a smuggler in the past, and he does have rather unconventional ways. I prefer to work within the law, so I got all the usual customs permits and approvals and so on. Though I admit that they're not for things from the Old Kingdom, because officially there is no Old Kingdom, so there are no forms. I also have a letter from my uncle, granting approval for me to bring across whatever I need for my experiment. Your uncle? He's the chief minister, Nick replied proudly. 17 years as CM this year, with a 3-year break in the middle when the moderate reform lot got in. The most successful CM the country has ever had, though, of course, he's having trouble now, with the Continental Wars and all the Southerling refugees pouring in. Still, I don't think Corleone and his ragtag bunch will get the numbers to unseat him. He's my mother's oldest brother, and a damn good chap. Always happy to help a deserving nephew. Those papers could have burned in your tent, suggested Lirael, clutching at another hope. No, said Nick. Thanks to Hedge again. He suggested I leave them with the fellow who's meeting us over the wall. Said they'd rot, which in hindsight is absolutely true. Now, are you going to let me go? No, said Lirael. You're being rescued, whether you like it or not. In that case, I shan't tell you any more, Nick proclaimed petulantly. He laid himself back down again, wrestling against the rushes. Lirael watched him, thoughts churning in her head. She hoped Elamir had received Sam's message, and at this moment there might be a strong force of guards riding to the rescue. Sabriel and Touchstone might also be rushing north from Corvair. They could even be about to cross the wall. But all of them would be headed for Edge, while the hemispheres that held the bound thing slipped away into Ancelstier, where the ancient spirit of destruction could gain its freedom, free from interference by the only people who understood the danger. Nick was watching her too, she realized, as those thoughts clamored in her mind, but not with puzzlement or enmity. He was just looking, tilting his head on the side, with one eye partly closed. Pardon me, he said. I was wondering how you knew Sam. Are you a princess? Only, if you're his fiancée or something, I thought I should know. To, offer my congratulations, as it were. And I don't even know your name. Lirael replied shortly. I'm Sam's aunt. I'm the, well, let's say I sort of work with Sam's mother, and I also was a second assistant librarian and a daughter of the Clare, though I don't expect you to know what those titles mean. I'm not at all sure myself at the moment. His aunt? Exclaimed Nick, a flush of embarrassment rather than fever color in his face. How can you be... I had no idea. I apologize, ma'am. And I'm much older than I look, Lirael added, in case you were going to ask. She was a little embarrassed herself, though she couldn't think why. She still didn't know how to talk about her mother. In some ways, it was more painful thinking about her now that she knew about her father and how she had come to be conceived. One day, she thought, she would find out exactly what had happened to Ariel and why she had chosen to go away. Wouldn't dream of it, replied Nick. You know, this sounds stupid, but I feel much better here than I have for weeks. Never would have I thought a swamp could be a tonic. I haven't even fainted today. You did once, said Lirael, when we first took you from the tent. Did I? Asked Nick. How embarrassing. I seem to be fainting a lot. Fortunately, it tends to be when Hedge is there to catch me. Can you tell when you're about to faint? Asked Lirael. She hadn't forgotten the dog's warning about how long the fragments would be subdued, and she was fairly certain she could not quell it again by herself. Usually, said Nick. I get nauseous first, and my eyesight goes peculiar. Everything goes red. And something happens to my sense of smell, so I get the sensation of something burning, like an electric motor fusing. But I do feel much better now. Perhaps the fever's broken." "It isn't a fever," Lirael said wearily, "though I hope it is better, for both our sakes. Sit still now. I'm going to paddle us a bit farther. We'll stay in the reeds, but I want to see what's happening on the lake. And please keep quiet." "Sure," said Nick. "I don't really have a choice, do I?" Lirael almost apologized, but she held it back. She did feel sorry for Nick. It wasn't his fault he'd been chosen by an ancient spirit of evil to be its avatar. She even felt sort of maternal to him. He needed to be tucked in bed and fed willow bark tea. That thought led to the idle speculation of what he might look like if he were well. He could be quite handsome, Lirael thought, and then instantly banished the notion. He might be an unwitting enemy, but he was still an enemy. The reed boat was light, but even so, it was hard work paddling with just her hands, particularly since she also had to keep an eye on Nicholas in case of trouble. But he seemed content to lie back on the high prow of the reed boat. Lirael did catch him looking at her surreptitiously, but he didn't try to escape or call out. After about 20 minutes of difficult paddling, the reeds began to thin out. The red water paled to pink, and Lirael could see the muddy lake bottom. The sun was well and truly up, so Lirael chanced pushing the boat to the very fringe of the reed marsh so she could look out on the lake but keep hidden. They were still covered overhead because of the way the reeds leaned into one another. Even so, Lirael was relieved to discover that she couldn't sense any gore-crows about, probably because there was a strong current beyond the reedy shores, combined with the bright sun of morning. Though there were no gore-crows in sight, there was something moving out on the surface of the lake. For a second, Lirael's heart lifted, as she thought it might be Sam, or a force of guards. Then she realized what it was, just as Nick spoke. "Look! My barges!" he called, sitting up and waving. "Hedge must have gotten the other one, and loaded it already." "Quiet!" hissed Lirael, reaching out to drag him down. He offered no resistance, but suddenly frowned and clutched his chest. I think I was counting my chickens before." "Fight it!" interrupted Lirael urgently. "Nick, you have to fight it!" "I'll try," Nick began, but he didn't finish his sentence, his head falling back with a dull, reedy thud. His eyes showed white, and Lirael saw a thin tendril of smoke begin to trickle from his nose and mouth. She slapped him hard across the face. "Fight it! You're Nicholas Sayer! Tell me who you are!" Nick's eyes rolled back, though smoke still trickled from his nose. I'm Nicholas John Andrew Sayer," he whispered. "I'm Nicholas. Nicholas." "Yes," urged Lirael. She put her sword down by her side and took his hands, shuddering as she felt the free magic coursing in the blood under his cold skin. "Tell me more about yourself, Nicholas John Andrew Sayer. Where were you born?" "I was born at Amber, my family home," whispered Nick. His voice grew stronger, and the smoke receded. "In the billiard room. No, that's a joke. Mother would kill me for that. I was born all proper for a Sayer, doctor and midwives in attendance. 2 midwives, no less, and the society doctor." Nick closed his eyes, and Lirael gripped his hands tighter. "Tell me! Anything!" she demanded. "The specific gravity of orbolite suspended in quicksilver is... I don't know what it is. The snow in Korovia is confined to the southern Alps, and the major passes are Kriskat, Jorsteci, and Korbuk. The average blue-tailed plover lays 26 eggs in the course of its 54-year lifespan. More than 100,000 Sutherlings landed illegally in the last year. The chocolate tree is an invention of..." He stopped suddenly, took a deep breath, and opened his eyes. Lirael kept holding his hands for a moment, but when she saw no sign of smoke or strangeness in his gaze, she dropped them and took up her sword again, resting the blade across her thighs. "I'm in trouble, aren't I?" said Nick. His voice was unsteady. He looked down at the bottom of the boat, hiding his face, taking very controlled breaths. "Yes," said Lirael, "but Samuth and I and our friends will do the best we can to save you." "But you don't think you can?" said Nicholas softly. This thing inside me. What is it? I don't know, replied Lirael, but it is part of some great and ancient evil, and you are helping it to be free, to wreak destruction. Nick nodded slowly. Then he looked up and met Lirael's gaze. It's been like a dream, he said simply. Most of the time, I don't really know whether I'm awake or not. I can't remember things from one minute to the next. I can't think of anything except the hymn. He stopped talking. Fear flashed in his eyes, and he reached out for Lirael. She took his left hand, but kept hold of her sword. If the thing inside him took over and wouldn't let her go, she knew she would have to cut her way free. It's okay, it's okay, it's okay, Nick repeated to himself, rocking backwards and forwards as he spoke. I've got it under control. Tell me what I have to do. Keep fighting, Lirael instructed, but she didn't know what else to tell him. If we can't keep you, then when the time comes, you must do whatever you can to stop it. Promise me you will. I promise, groaned Nick through clenched teeth. Word of a sayer, I'll stop it. I will. Talk to me, please, Lirael. I have to think about something else. Tell me, where were you born? In the Claire's glacier, said Lirael nervously. Nick's grip was tightening, and she didn't like it. In the birthing rooms of the infirmary, though some Claire have their babies in their own rooms. Most of us, them, have their children in the birthing rooms because everyone's there and it's more communal and fun. Your parents? Gasped Nick. He shuddered and started to speak very quickly. Tell me about them. Nothing to tell about mine. Father's a bad politician, though enthusiastic with it. His older brother's the success. Mother goes to parties and drinks too much. How is it you're Samuth's aunt? I don't understand how you could be Touchstone's or Sabriel's sister. I've met them, much older than you. Ancient, must be 40, if a day. Speak to me, please, speak to me. I'm Sabriel's sister, said Lirael, though the words felt strange on her tongue. Sabriel's sister, but not by the same mother. My father was, with my mother only for a little while, before he died. I didn't even know who he was till quite recently. My mother went away when I was 5, so I didn't know my father was the Abhorsen. Oh no! Abhorsen! Cried Nick. His body convulsed, and Lirael felt his skin suddenly grow even colder. She hurriedly wrenched her hand free and backed as far away as she could, cursing herself for saying Abhorsen aloud when Nicholas was already on the edge of losing control. Of course it would set off the free magic inside him. White smoke began to pour out of Nick's nose and mouth. White sparks flickered behind his tongue as he desperately tried to speak. He mouthed it, but only smoke came out, and it took a moment for Lirael to work out what it was he was trying to say. No! Or perhaps, go! That's the end of chapter 11. That was so hard to read. I'm so sorry, this video is going to be so choppy. I have so much to edit. I messed up so many times reading that. Anyways, I hope it was still enjoyable. Oh my gosh, I always do my best on these readings, but I don't know if I could post them if I didn't know how to edit these videos together in a like cohesive way. Oh, okay, I need a drink. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed that reading. I will post the next chapter tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yeah, every chapter is gonna be a humdinger. Anyways, I better go get to editing and eat something. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. I wonder if any of you do anything for the full moon. I always try to set a few intentions about what I want to do for the next 2 weeks. I'm trying to live my life more by the moon cycles and less by the calendar. Just something about me. Something I like to do now, being 38. Anyways, I'll See you tomorrow. Have a great rest of your evening. Take care. And as always, may your magic manifest. Bye.